All right, well, we are missing a few today, aren't we? But thankful to know that where they are worshiping the Lord and actually visiting a church that helps support the mission work. So it's always nice to be able to go somewhere and know that there's brothers and sisters in Christ that you can fellowship with. We do miss them, though, and we're praying for them as they're going to be traveling home. I think some of them probably tomorrow, so just continue to pray for them as they're away, right? Okay, we had been going through the book of 1 Corinthians, and I promise, Lord willing, we will get back there. I'm partway through chapter 15, but when we went to this mission conference out at Trinity Baptist Church in Richmond, Kentucky, I got a little bit distracted by a few of the things that we covered and were covered there in the missions conference. And last week we of course talked about John chapter 4 and Jesus meeting with the woman at the well. It was kind of neat because I was going to bring a lesson on the demon-possessed man at Decapolis, and then also talk about 1 Thessalonians, both of which are very, 1 Thessalonians is very much a part of the Lord's working in this mission work. But what Brother Jason Reinhardt brought was the woman at the well, and that also happens to be very much a part of the Lord's working in this mission work. And again, as I mentioned last week, you look at the big banner that hangs right by our door. It is actually referring to John chapter 4. And we talked a little bit about how that the woman at the well, when she heard and knew that he was the Messiah, man, she went back to her family, her friends, the town, and she got the people, and she said, man, I met the Messiah, and she brought them out, right? And the Lord then taught them, and by the end of it they said, hey, we believe him not just because we heard you, but because we heard him, right? We closed, and I didn't say this until after the services, but one thing that was pointed out is, had you ever noticed that the disciples were coming back from the same place that the woman went, right? They went to town to buy food, brought it back, brought nobody with them. The woman went back to town and brought a crowd with her. It is quite the reprimand, really, in my mind, to those that were closest to the Lord in his ministry, that they had apparently no desire to tell the people in the town, hey, the Messiah is back out there by the well, right? Of course, we understand they were in Samaria, probably didn't have a whole lot of love for the Samaritans. But the thing is Jesus Christ died for us while we were yet enemies. He's also told us that we are to love our enemies, right? And what we need is we want to make sure that we are carrying the gospel message far and wide to anybody and everybody, right? That is our command. Now, we are not going to be in John chapter 4. We are going to be in Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. This is a really, really interesting story for a whole lot of reasons. And we'll probably read, not the whole chapter, but we'll read the first 20 verses. Starting in verse 1, it says, and they came over unto the other side of the sea, unto the country of the Gadarenes. Now I want you to understand the context. It says they came unto the other side of the sea. If you had backed up to Mark chapter 4, you would have seen a very familiar story. This is when Jesus says to the disciples, let's pass over to the other side of the sea. They send the multitudes away. They get into the ships. They start to go across, and there's a great storm, and the waves are beating against the ship. And we get down to this part where Jesus is sleeping on a pillow, and they come and say, don't you care that we're about to die? And Jesus gets up and he tells the sea and the winds to peace, be still. And the wind ceased and there was a great calm. And he said, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, what manner of man is this that even the wind and the sea obey him. That is the story that is there, right? Man, they marvel at the fact that the wind and the waves obey him. Now, when they get through that whole ordeal and they get across to the other side, they go into the country of the Gadarenes, and it says in verse 2 of chapter 5, "And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been oft bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. And always," get that? Always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not." For he had said unto him, "Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit." And he asked him, "What is thy name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there were nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought him, saying, "Send us unto the swine, that we may enter into them." And forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. There were about 2,000, and they were choked in the sea. And they that had fed the swine fled, and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that was done. And they came to Jesus, and see him that was possessed with a devil, and had the legion, sitting and clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And they saw it, and told them how it befell to him that was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coasts. And when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, "Go home to thy friends, tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee." And he departed and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. Now there is just so much here in this passage that we've read. You can find accounts of this, parallel accounts of this in Matthew chapter 8. The one in Matthew chapter 8 is a little bit shorter version. If you look in Luke chapter 8, you'll find almost the exact same account that you find here in Mark chapter 5. One thing that Luke chapter 8 does tell us, Mark told us that he was roaming the tombs and the mountains, and he was crying day and night and cutting himself, that he couldn't be bound by chains and fetters. Luke chapter 8 actually adds to it that he was naked, that he was roaming the tombs and the mountains without clothes. I mean, this guy was wild and untamed. And we see here really a man that is, man, he's hit rock bottom, right? You can't get much lower than this guy is right now, right? Think about the despair of this guy. The Bible tells us that he is full of unclean spirits. I don't know what all this guy has been through and all the things that he was doing and where he was at and all those other things. But listen, by the time he meets Jesus, we're told that he had legions of unclean spirits. And when the Lord cast them out, they literally filled 2,000 swine. This is a man who is tormented. Now, he falls at the feet of Jesus, and I believe when you read the context of this, I don't think I'm wrong here. When he falls at the feet of Jesus and says, "I adjure thee by God, don't torment us." I think those are the unclean spirits speaking. And they say some of those things because the Bible tells us that Jesus had told them to come out of him. And they ask, can we go into the swine? And he says, yes. And when they go into the swine, literally it drives the swine nuts. And they in essence, run off a cliff. And they drowned in the sea. But let's just back up a second and talk about this guy. Literally, people have taken him and they've tied him up because they can't tame him. And they've tied him up. And he'll break through whatever they've tied him up with, and he'll run off again. And he spends his time in the tombs. In other words, he spends his time in the place of the dead, where all the dead bodies are buried. He roams the mountains, he roams the tombs. And it says that he's literally crying. And not just crying, but as he goes, he's actually cutting himself with stones and things. This is not he's falling down and cutting himself because he's running through the mountains. This is a man that's in so much torment that his reaction is to cut himself. He's in despair. I don't know that you can draw a whole lot more despicable picture than what this guy is. And I don't know how long it's been going on, but he built quite a reputation. Everybody in the land knew you couldn't tame that guy. And he actually, it seems, if you read all three Gospels, he was kind of not just a nuisance, but like a danger. But they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't contain him. But when Jesus got off the boat, notice it says immediately. Isn't it interesting? Jesus shows up and lands at just the spot where this guy happens to be. You also know by the end of the story that this apparently is the only person that Jesus touched while he was on that side of the sea. Hey, multitudes came out from the surrounding country and the city, but they just wanted him to leave. Don't you think the guy that could calm the wind and the rain and say, peace be still, and the calm and the seas are calm? Don't you think the guy that knew who had touched him? Don't you think the guy that knew the sin in somebody's life? I mean, you think about all the things that Jesus Christ did in his ministry. Don't you think that he knew that this was probably the only person he was going to touch while he was over there? But he went. I mentioned this when we were out in Kentucky. What I love about this story, and even the woman at the well, but especially this story. Listen, oftentimes when we think about the gospel stories in the New Testament, we think about the preaching to the multitudes. We think about when he fed the 5,000, and right, they were there, and why were they there? Because they were listening to his teachings. But you know what? Some of the most powerful accounts of Jesus working with people are the individual stories when he's dealing one-on-one with somebody. It shows just how personal the working of Jesus Christ in somebody's life is. Sure, he preaches to the multitudes. Yes, he feeds the 5,000. But he'll cross the sea for the one. You see him come, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on some of the demon possession stuff here. Just want to know that it does say that he cried with a loud voice in verse 7. What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, come out of the man, and thou unclean spirit. And he said, what is thy name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them out of the country. We know, and I'm not going to read all this again, we know that the devils besought that he would send them into the swine. That's exactly what he did. And all 2,000 of them, man, they went nuts, and they just off over the side of the cliff into the sea, and they drowned. The people that were watching, actually got scared. Now, they may be scared for a few reasons. I don't know. Maybe it's because they were supposed to be responsible for the 2,000 swine that just went off the cliff. I have a feeling it was more about the fact that they saw what Jesus Christ could do. You know what they did? They ran to the city. Some of them went to the countryside. I don't know how much time this took. We sometimes think about this like, Jesus gets off the boat, the guy comes running up, he casts out the stuff, the swine run off the side of the cliff, and 10 minutes later the whole city's out looking at what's going on. It probably took longer than that, right? I mean, they went back to the city, they had to spread the word. It even says that they went out into the country. Like, I don't know how long this took, but there's some time that's passed. Probably not a long, long time, but we're not talking 10 minutes, right? This has been a little while. And it says in verse 15, and they came to Jesus and see him that was possessed with a devil and had the legion sitting. And what had he been doing? Running through the mountains and the tombs day and night. But now he's sitting. Luke told us he had been naked running through the tombs and the mountains. Well, now he's clothed. He had been crying and cutting himself. Now he's in his right mind. And those next few words are kind of sad. And they were afraid. I really wonder about that. I just have to ask myself, you've got this guy, and he's been tormenting the countryside, and if you're out at night, you can hear him moaning and crying and screaming in the tombs. It's kind of freaky. But now, man, he's sitting there calm at the feet of Jesus. He's fully clothed. He's actually what you wanted him to be this whole time. And it scares him. It scares him. Who is this one that can control this guy, this demon-possessed guy, that not even chains can keep him? And they're afraid. In verse 16, and they that saw it told them how it befell him that was possessed with the devil. They come out, they see this, they're afraid. They learn a little bit more from the people that actually saw it. Man, the guy come running up and Jesus talked to him and man, he just said told those demons to get out and ran off into those swine. He actually carried on a conversation with the demons. Now they're really scared. It says in verse 17, and they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. Now, you see this guy that's able to take somebody that is wild and crazy and chains can't even keep him, and yet Jesus changes that man's life, and the first thing they want Jesus to do, leave. We don't want you here. Now, there's lots of conversations about were they upset about the swine that ran off. It honestly seems more like they were just kind of freaked out. We don't want you here, which is a really odd reaction in my mind. But literally that word pray there means to invoke or invite. They were not just saying to themselves, we kind of hope he leaves. They were saying, why don't you just get back on that boat and just go? Right? They were asking, and I use air quotes there, right? They were asking him to leave. Man, they wanted Jesus gone. Verse 19. Verse 18, sorry. And when he was come into the ship, that's Jesus, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. I love that verse. You see here a man that's totally changed. You see here a guy who sees his Savior. He knows what he was. You have to know that this guy at one point had family and friends. He's probably been separated from them for a long time. I don't know about you, but your first reaction might be, man, you're in your right mind. You've got your clear thoughts for the first time in years. You're not in depression. You're not in grief. You're not in sorrow. You're not in pain. And you might think, man, I can go back and see my family. But you know what this man said? This man said, Lord, I want to go with you. I don't even need to go back home. I don't need to go tell anybody goodbye. Lord, can I get on the boat? I want to come right now. That's the picture that you see. Man, he is in his right mind, fully clothed, already learning at Jesus' feet. And he says, take me with you. I want to go. Wherever you go, I want to go. Man, this guy, he is zealous for Christ. He wants to be with him. Do you see the desire? I mean, Lord, I want to go. I just want to go with you. Why do you want to go with Christ? Man, because that was his Redeemer. That was his Savior. That's the one that changed his life. You know, when you think about Jesus calling the disciples, right? And he called them to leave their family. He called them to leave their jobs. He called them to go where he went. Some people that wanted to follow him, he told them, hey, man, I don't have a place to lay my head. You come with me, it's going to be rough. But he didn't tell them no. You look at even what he did with the apostles. You look at what Stephen did and how he traveled and evangelized in different places. You look at the Apostle Paul and how God called Paul to be an apostle to the Gentiles, and he sent him all over the world at that point. And this man said, just let me get on the boat with you. Just let me get on the boat with you. Verse 19, though, says, howbeit Jesus suffered him not. Jesus said no. He was pleading with the Lord, take me with you. Take me with you. But it says the Lord suffered him not, but saith unto him, go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. And this guy wants to go. But Jesus says, no, that's not my plan for you. That's not my plan for you. What I want you to do is I want you to go back there to that city. You know, the place that's been coming out and grabbing you and tying you down with fetters and chains and those people. I want you to go back there. I want you to find your family. I want you to find your friends, and I want you to tell them what I've done for you. I want you to tell them how great things the Lord, the Master, has done in your life, and how he had compassion on you. That's what I want you to do. And you know what the man did? He did it. You don't see the next verse saying, but Lord, please let me go with you. I don't want to go back there. Lord, I want to go where you go. You know what he did? He went. He went where the Lord sent him. Because he recognized him as his Lord and his master. And he recognized that if this is what the one that did this for me, if this is what he wants me to do, this is what I'm going to do. It says in verse 20, and he departed and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. Man, he did what Jesus Christ said. You know where he went? Man, he went back to the city. Can you imagine those conversations? I don't know whether or not any of his friends were in the group that came out and chased Jesus out. I say chased, asked Jesus to leave. I don't know. But can you imagine some of those conversations? You're sitting in your house. Maybe you're sitting down for supper. Man, who's here this time of night? And you open the door, and almost instantly you're struck probably with fear. Not you. Maybe he's still got the scars that are healing on his body where he's been cutting himself, but they're not fresh. And he says, I'm different. I'm different. See, there was this man named Jesus that came. And it's so hard, you're not going to believe this, but literally, through only speaking words, he was able to cast out the demons that had tormented me. And I sat at his feet, and he taught me. And he changed my life. Man, you see these scars? Look. This is my life. This was my life. And I literally roamed the mountains, hanging out with the dead bodies. In so much torment. You can't fathom the torment I was under. Man, it made me look at these scars. Man, the torment I was under, man, I was just cutting myself, crying day and night. I was tormented. But Jesus, man, the very words of Jesus changed my life. I'll be honest. As I sat at his feet and I knew he was leaving, and I just wanted to go. I just wanted to go with him. But you know what? He told me to come back and to tell you. He told me to come back and tell you what he did. And I'm here. Because man, he is my Redeemer. And he is my Master. And he changed my life. And I'm here today to tell you about his compassion. I'm here today to tell you how he heals. I'm here today to tell you that he changes lives. And the people that he talked to said they marveled at it. Hey, this is no fleeting thing where Jesus was there and this guy is in his right mind, but as soon as Jesus leaves, he just goes wild again. No, man, this guy has changed. And it marvels them. And when we were at the missions conference, I talked about the idea that sometimes when we think about mission work, we think about evangelism, we tend to always think about going away. And listen, there is a valid, 100% valid place. The work that the Lord had for the Apostle Paul when he went to Antioch, and then he went over here, and he went over here, and he went to this island, and he went to that place, and he went to this place. And then he did it again, and he expanded it, and he went further. And he did it again, and he expanded it, and he went further. Listen, that's what the Lord called him to do. But we need to understand that the Lord doesn't always call somebody to go 6 countries over. What did he call you to do? I will also say, and we don't know, the Bible doesn't go into great depth. We aren't told that this man was ordained, that while sitting at the feet of Jesus, Jesus Christ ordained him to be a preacher, to be a pastor. We aren't even told that he was called to be a missionary in the term that we think of it. He was literally told, just go back to town and tell your friends. Tell them what you did. Tell them what I did for you. Tell them how your life is different now. When I look at this man, you know what I think about? I think about everybody that sits in a church pew and is a member of one of the Lord's churches. That's what I think about when I read this story. I think about the idea that the Lord Jesus Christ redeemed us, changed our lives, saved our souls, and when he left this earth, he said, go. And when we see those words, well, we think about the missionaries that go far and wide. And listen, that is absolutely in the command, because it was told Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the world. But do you know what? And we'll get into this when we cover 1 Thessalonians. When Apostle Paul or Peter or Stephen, although he didn't travel, he was preaching right there in the synagogues. Philip is who I meant to say. Listen, when those guys went and they preached and people were saved, think about Apostle Paul. He would go somewhere, he'd preach, people would be saved. And when he left, do you know what? There weren't hundreds of people that left and went with him. You might have a few. You know, he later picked up Timothy, which had been at one of the places he had preached. But you know what? A lot of people, when Paul got chased out of town, hey, those new believers were still there. They stayed. They stayed. And you know what they did? They carried on the work of the Lord in that place. And by the way, not just coming to church in that place, but actually witnessing and telling people and living a life in a way that showed others that they were different. So whether Jesus says, yeah, come on, get in the boat, we're going to go. Or whether Jesus says, no, I want you to go back and tell your family. I want you to go back and tell your friends. That's what I want you to do. Jesus Christ has bought and paid for you. He's redeemed you. He's changed you. He's given you a new life. He's given you an eternity and a promise of eternity with Him. You need to go where He sends you. And if He tells you stay right here, then you stay right there. But I guarantee you, He isn't going to tell you just stay right there and do nothing. He's told you wherever you are, you tell people about me. You tell them what I've done for you. There's some debate about this, and I'm going to just say this and close. I do understand there's some debate about this. But there's some indication in the Scriptures that when Jesus Christ was back in this general vicinity, do you know what happened when He was in the general vicinity? The cities brought their sick to Him, asking Him to help them. We don't know for sure because the Bible doesn't say, but I personally believe and wonder, at least, did that have something to do with this guy that stayed and told the people of Decapolis and the surrounding area, what Jesus Christ had done for him? Because listen, he gets a totally different reception when he's back next time. Tell people what Jesus Christ did for you. Each and every one of us can do that. You know, there's some things, because the Lord has called me to be a preacher, and because, hey, listen, ladies, I'm a guy. There's some things that I can do that the Lord is never going to call you to do. I know it's going to offend some people. The Lord is never going to call you ladies to be a pastor of a church. You may be a pastor's wife. He's never going to call you to be a pastor of a church, because the Bible teaches that very specifically. I'm not being mean. I'm not being degrading. That's just the way it is. However, don't sit there for a second and think, well, that means that I can't be doing mission work. I can't be doing evangelism. That does not mean that. You will have the opportunity to talk to people that I will probably never have an opportunity to talk to. Tell your friends about Jesus Christ and what he's done for you. Just like the man at Decapolis was told to do. All right, Brother Philip, if you would, come and lead us in a song. We're thankful to know that the Lord has redeemed our souls. We're thankful to know that he has sent us to do his work.